My boyfriend publicly humiliated me on TikTok, calling me the most hideous girl he's ever been with before dumping me, so I disappeared without a word. This morning, after ignoring 37M calls, I opened my door to find him sobbing on his knees. So Derek and I have been together for almost 3 years. Met him when I was 21. He was the guy who knew how to fix the garbage disposal when it jammed. First green flag or so, I thought. We exchanged Instagrams, started texting, and the rest just kind of happened. Past 3 years have been mostly good. We had our rhythm, Netflix documentaries on Thursdays, his mom's for dinner every other Sunday, camping trips with his friends in the summer. He always remembered my birthday and actually listened when I talked about my hey. These days, that's practically unicorn behavior. Side note, my last boyfriend, before him, thought emotional labor was a type of childbirth, so my bar was admittedly on the floor. Fast forward to this Tuesday, I'm scrolling on my phone during lunch, and my phone dings with a text from my friend Amara. It's just a TikTok link with "call me now" in all caps. Amara is not the dramatic type. She once texted slight issue when her apartment was literally flooding. I click the link, and there's Derek. He at throwbacks that dive bar his buddies. Always hang it on Mondays, I could tell by the neon Budweiser sign behind him that flickers every 7 seconds. We counted. Once, while waiting for our order, he's clearly 6 beers deep, red-faced arms lung around his friend Xavier. Someone off-camera asks, "So rate your girlfriend?" Bro, and y'all, the look on his face changed. It wasn't his normal smile. It was this weird smirk I'd never seen before, like he was about to let everyone in on some private joke. Eliana, honestly, probably the most hideous girl I've ever been with, like a 4 on a good day. The bar erupts in "oh," and someone yells, "Savage." Derek just laughs and keeps going, but she cooks really good enchiladas ever. Complains when I go out with the boys, so I keep her around low maintenance. Then someone asks if he's worried. I'll see the video. His response: "Nah, she doesn't even know what TikTok is. Besides thinking about upgrading soon. Anyway, too much baggage." The timestamp showed it was posted at 11:43 p.m. Monday night while I was at home doing a freaking clay mask and texting him good night. The video had 177,000 views, 17,000. I sat there in the break, was just staring at my phone, didn't cry, didn't scream, just felt this weird cold feeling spreading through my chest. 3 years together, and this is what he actually thinks of me. The night before, and at my place, we'd made dinner together. We talked about maybe moving in when my lease ends in August. He'd kissed me goodbye and said, "Love you, babe," like it was nothing. And apparently 12 hours later, I was the hideous girlfriend he was planning to dump. I texted Amara back, "Coming over after work, don't tell anyone." Then I muted all notifications, put my phone in my bag, and somehow made it through 3 more client appointments without completely breaking down. Autopilot is weird like that after work. I didn't go home, went straight to Target. Bought a cheap duffel bag, filled it with essentials: toothbrush, deodorant, phone, charger, couple t-shirts, spent $47.16. The receipt is still in my wallet. For some reason, drove to Amar's apartment complex at 6:13 p.m., sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes just staring at nothing, playing that video over and over. In my head, I keep thinking about all the times Derek told me I looked beautiful when I dressed up for his company. Christmas party when I was at the flu last winter, 3 weeks ago when we were at the beach, and I was so self-conscious about wearing a bikini. All lies, or just things you say when you're with someone. Amara didn't ask questions when I showed up, just pointed to her couch bed, 2 glasses of the cheap rosé we drank in college, and said, "What's the plan?" That's when I decided I'm not giving him the satisfaction of a breakup conversation. No tears, no begging, no dramatic confrontation he can tell his bros about. Later, I'm just going to disappear. We spent that night making a chest. Blocked Dirk on everything: phone, Instagram, Twitter, change all my passwords. He knew most of them. Call out from work for the rest of the week. Tell only my mom where I really am. By midnight, Derek had texted 7 times. Normal stuff at first. "Hey, what do you want for dinner? And you still coming over tonight?" By morning, it was, "Where are you and why aren't you?" Answer. Afternoon, he'd called 12 times. Not one mention of the TikTok. Not one apology. Nothing. I stayed at Amar's Wednesday and Thursday, binged all of Love Island trash. TV is surprisingly therapeutic when your life is imploding. Cried in the shower, so Amara wouldn't hear. Ordered too much Uber Eats because neither of us felt like cooking. Friday morning, Amar went to my apartment to grab more of my clothes. Said Derek had clearly been there. Empty energy drink cans on the counter. His jacket thrown over my couch. He'd left a note taped to my door. "Call me, we need to talk." Still nothing about why we might need to talk, like I'm supposed to. Just not know about the video. The TikTok mysteriously disappeared from his account on Thursday night too, though it had already been recorded and was making rounds in our friend group. My phone was blowing up with "Are you okay?" texts from people I haven't talked to in months. Weekend was a blur of ignoring calls from unknown numbers. Derek using his friends' phones. Once he realized I'd blocked him and jumping every time someone knocked on Amar's door. Margaret from my old community college group chat sent me screenshots of Derek's Instagram stories, vague posts about missing someone and biggest mistake of my life, with sad song lyrics, classic damage control. Sunday night 26 missed calls. Monday morning 32. I finally went back to work on Monday. My manager hugged me when I walked in. Apparently the video had made it to her FYP2, told me to take another day if I needed it. I said no, I needed normal, needed to focus on something other than the dumpster fire. That was my relationship Derek showed. Up at the salon during my lunch break, I hid in the supply closet while my coworker told him I wasn't there. Heard his voice, that familiar low rumble I used to love through the door. Sounded tired. Goodbye. Tuesday morning. Exactly 1 week since I'd seen the video. The missed call count was at 37. His latest text just said, "Please, I needed to swing by my apartment for my mail. Had a package that needed signature. Figured 8 o'clock a.m. was safe since Derek usually leaves for work at 7:30. I was wrong. I unlocked my door and there he was sitting on my welcome mat. The one he gave me that says, "Home is where the Wi-Fi cuts." Automatically, he looked up when he heard, "My keys, y'all." The man was a wreck, hadn't shaved, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same Metallica shirt he'd had on in his Instagram story from 2 days ago. When he saw me, he literally crumpled, not in a fake, dramatic way, like his body physically gave out on his knees, tears immediately streaming, saying my name over and over. I just stood there, keys still in hand, felt nothing then. Everything. Then nothing again. Eliana, please, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I said those things. I was drunk. The guys were pressuring me. I never meant any of it. Please just talk to me. I cut him off. I saw what you really think me. There's nothing to talk about. Stepped around him like he was of furniture, got my mail, walked back to my car. He followed me to the parking lot. Still crying, still begging, got in my car, locked the doors, drove back to Amar's. He called 5 more times before I even made it across town. So that brings us to now. It's been exactly 8 days, 4 hours, and 22 minutes since I saw that video, since I realized the person I trusted most in the world sees me as a convenient placeholder until something better comes along. I don't know what happened next. Part of me, a small stupid part, misses him, misses the routine, misses believing I was loved. I keep replaying his words from the video. Hideous upgrade, so casual, so cruel. 3 years together, that's what I'm worth. Will update when there's more to tell. For now, I'm just getting it one day at a time. First update, y'all. Remember me, the girl whose boyfriend of 3 years called her hideous on TikTok and then had the audacity to act shocked when she disappeared? Yeah, that's still me, unfortunately. First of all, thank you for all the support on my last post. It's been exactly 17 days since I saw that video and 9 days since Derek showed up crying on my doorstep. Let me tell you, things have gotten weird. So after I left Derek in the parking lot that morning, Tuesday, 8:43 a.m., according to my car's timestamp, I drove straight back to Amar's place in full zombie mode. The whole drive, my phone kept lighting up with calls. Derek had apparently moved on to using his mom's phone to reach me, which is a special kind of desperate. When I got back to Amar's, I just sat in her kitchen staring at the faded live laugh tequila magnet on her fridge. I couldn't cry anymore. It was like emotions had finally reached their data limit for the month. Amara came home from her shift around 2 p.m. and found me in the exact same position, still in my coat. She just sighed, handed me a White Claw from the fridge, lime, the superior flavor, and said something that actually made me think. She asked if I'd been noticing red flags with Derek all along, but had just been filtering them out. First, I was defensive. Derek and I had a good relationship. He remembered my birthday. He watched The Bachelor with me. Even though he hated it, he never complained. When my hair clogged the shower drain, the bar is literally in hell these days, and I thought he was clearing with room to spare. But then Amar started asking specific questions. Did Derek ever make jokes about my appearance before? Well, there was that time he said my favorite jeans made me look kind of wide, but in a cute way. And when I got highlights last summer, he asked if the salon meant to make them that brassy, and he did have a weird habit of pointing out celebrities he found attractive. Always the super thin, No makeup. Types who look nothing like mid. Derek support my goals. He said he was proud when I got promoted last year, but also suggested maybe I shouldn't take it because the stress might be too much when I talked about maybe going back to school someday. He always changed the subject to how expensive it would be. Did Derek have equal standards for our relationship? Thinking about it, not really. If I was 15 minutes late meeting him, I'd get a series of increasingly annoyed texts, but he could cancel plans last minute to hang with the boys, and I was supposed to be cool with it by the time we finished our White Claw. I had this sinking feeling in my stomach. The TikTok wasn't some bizarre out-of-character moment. It was just the first time I'd seen what had been there all along without the filter of wanting to believe we were perfect. That night, Derek escalated to a new level at exactly 9:17 p.m. Amara's doorbell rang. We both froze like we'd been caught committing a crime through the peephole. Derek holding the saddest looking grocery store flowers I've ever seen. Amara went full mama bear mode. She opened the door just enough to block the view inside and told him I wasn't there. I could hear his voice crack as he begged her to just let him talk to me. For 5 minutes, said he hadn't slept in days, said he'd lost 7 BS, said he'd do anything to fix this. After Amara finally got him to leave, she found a handwritten letter. He slipped under the door. 8 pages, 8, front and back. I have to admit I read it twice. It was a lot. Tear stains on the paper, promises to spend the rest of my life making this up to you. Explanations about how he was drunk, how his friends were peer pressuring him, how he'd been having a bad day at work. Classic deflection bingo, but one line actually got to me. I said those horrible things because I'm insecure. 8. You'll realize you're too good me. For about 20 minutes, I considered calling him. That's how messed up my brain was. Like he humiliated me publicly, and I was feeling bad for him. Thankfully, Amar's Wi-Fi chose that exact moment to crash. Classic Thursday night Xfinity outage, so we couldn't even stream anything. Instead, we ended up going through old photos on my phone, and that's when I had my first real epiphany. In literally every picture of Derek and me together from the past year, I'm looking at him with this big smile, and he's either looking at his phone or off to the side or some stupid face, not a single one where he's looking at the way I'm looking at him. How did I ever notice that? Before Friday morning brought a new development. My brother Miguel called to tell me that Derek had shown up at his apartment at 7 a.m. asking if he knew where I was. Miguel being the overprotective brother, he has told Derek that if he came by again, they'd be having a different kind of conversation. Dramatic, but I appreciate the sentiment. By that point, I was actually starting to feel smothered by all of Derek's attempts to contact me. It wasn't romantic, it was uncomfortable, so I did something I'd been avoiding. I drafted a text, simple, direct, no room for misinterpretation. I need space. Please stop contacting me. My friends and my family, I'll reach out if I'm ready to talk. Set at 10:22 a.m. Immediately turned my phone off for 3 hours because I couldn't handle seeing his response. When I finally checked again, there were 5 paragraphs waiting for me. The gist: he understood he'd respect my boundaries. He'd wait forever if that's what it took. Followed immediately by 3 more texts asking when forever might end and if we could please just meet for coffee. Weak. So much for respecting boundaries. The weekend was actually full. Amara's roommate Margaret was out of town visiting her parents, so we had the place to ourselves. We ordered in, did face masks, watched all 3 Magic Mike movies for the plot, obviously, and I went a full 24 hours without checking my phone. It felt like coming up for air after being underwater Sunday night. Though things took another turn, was scrolling through Instagram before bed. Bad habit, I know. When I saw it, Derek had posted a video, not just any video, public apology to me, tagged me in it, and everything. 4 minutes and 27 seconds of him sitting in his car looking directly at the camera with red-rimmed eyes, telling everyone who saw that horrible TikTok how sorry he was, how much he regrets hurting the most beautiful person inside and out that ever known, and how he's learning to be a better man. The comments were a mess. Some people praising him for taking accountability, barf, others calling him out for making my humiliation about him. Again, his buddy Xavier commenting, stay strong bro, like Derek was the victim. Here I couldn't sleep after that, thinking about how even his apology was public, even his supposed rock bottom moment was carefully filmed, probably with multiple takes posted at optimal engagement hours. 8 p.m. on a Sunday. Monday morning, I decided I needed to go back to my own apartment. Amara had been amazing, but I couldn't hide at her place forever, plus her hot water heater had been acting up all weekend, and cold showers in February are not the vibe. As I was packing up my duffel bag, my phone pinged with a Venmo notification. Derek had sent me $300 with the note for the anniversary dinner We'll never have our 3-year anniversary would have been. Next week, I sent it back immediately, then blocked him on Venmo to the drive. Back to my apartment felt like going to a job interview I knew I'd bomb. Every red light had me checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Derek's car pull up behind me, but my apartment building was dirt-free when I arrived. My neighbor, Mrs. Rogers, nodded at me in the hallway, like I hadn't been gone for over 2 weeks. My plants were all dead, ripped too. My supposedly impossible-to-kill snake plant, the air smelled stale and slightly like the Indian takeout if forgotten in the fridge. It felt both strange and familiar, like putting on jeans that don't quite fit anymore. And then I saw them post-it notes everywhere on my bathroom mirror. I miss your smile on my fridge. Remember our first here on my TV. Our Netflix queue misses you on my bedside table. I can't sleep without you. I stood there in shock, slowly realizing what had happened. Derek still had the spare key I'd given him last year. He'd been in my apartment while I was gone. My skin instantly crawled. I checked all the closets under the bed behind the shower, curtain half convinced he might be hiding somewhere he wasn't. The violation of my space felt just as creepy. I called my landlord immediately and explained the situation. He agreed to change my locks the next morning. Then I systematically went through my apartment, removing every SLE post-it note and ripping them into tiny pieces. Petty, maybe satisfying. Absolutely, that night was my first one back in my own bed, and I won't lie, it was weird. I kept waking up expecting to feel Derek's weight on the mattress. My brain hadn't caught up to the reality that we were over Tuesday morning. Yesterday I was making fee. When someone knocked on my door, my heart stopped for a second before I remembered Derek's key wouldn't work anymore. It wasn't Derek, it was Xavier, who had been in that TikTok video laughing along while Derek called me hideous. Xavier, who I'd been friends with before. I even met Derek. Xavier, who had apparently come as Derek's ambassador. He looked uncomfortable, shifted from foot to foot in the hallway, started with small talk about the weather seriously, before finally getting to the point. Derek was in a really bad place and just wanted 5 minutes to explain himself. I asked Xavier if he remembered laughing. In that video, he had the decency to look ashamed, said he was drunk and just going along with the guys, then hit me with this gem. He didn't mean any of it, Eliana. You know how guys talk when they're together. I don't want to be with someone who talks like that with his friends. Drunk or sober, I don't wonder what he says about me when I'm around. I don't to be with someone who needs a public meltdown and a friendship intervention to realize he values me. Thanked Xavier for coming by, told him I hoped Derek would feel better soon, and closed the door last night. Went through my phone and unfollowed Derek on every platform we still connected on. Took down the photos of us from my apartment walls, packed up the hoodie he always left at my place and the Xbox controller he used when he came over, put them in a box in my closet. Not ready to return them yet, but not wanting to see them either. Then I ordered myself dinner from that place Derek always complained was too spicy, but that I secretly loved. Ate it while watching The Last of Us, which Derek refused to watch because he doesn't like zombie shows. The fancy bath bomb my mom got me for Christmas that I'd been leaving for a special occasion around midnight. My phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It's Derek. Please don't block this number. Just need to know one thing. Did those 3 years mean anything to you? Because they were everything to me. I stared at those words for a long time. 3 years of inside jokes and holiday dinners and lazy Sunday mornings. 3 years of building a life I thought we'd share forever, and also 3 years of small criticisms dressed as jokes. 3 years of walking on eggshell around his moods. 3 years of making myself smaller to make him comfortable. Didn't reply, just added the number to my blocked list and turned off my phone. This morning I woke up and did something I haven't done in 2.5 weeks. I made a plan for me, not a reaction to Derek, not a hiding strategy, just a normal day for myself. But as I was heading out to grab coffee, I saw something that stopped me cold. Profile picture on Instagram had changed to a photo of us from last summer at his cousin's wedding. My head on his shoulder, both of us smiling. It shouldn't matter. It shouldn't affect me at all, but it did. We'll update again when there's more to tell. For now, I'm taking it day by day and remembering what my grandma always said. Sometimes the trash takes itself out. Second update, y'all. Isn't planning on updating so soon, but the past week has been a lot and I need to process. It's been exactly 32 days since I saw that video. 1 month of rebuilding my life without someone who I thought was my future. And honestly, some days are better than others. The weirdest thing happened last Saturday. I was at Target My emotional support store, don't judge. Picking up some new sheets as I finally decided to get rid of the gray ones Derek always said brought out the blue in his eyes gag I was debating. Between sage green and terracotta, when I noticed a woman staring at me from the end of the aisle, at first thought maybe I had something on my face or toilet paper stuck to my shoe. Wouldn't be the first time, but then she walked over looking super uncomfortable and asked if I was the girl from Dick's TikTok. My stomach instantly knotted up. It's one thing to be humiliated online. It's another to be recognized by strangers at Target on a random Saturday while wearing no makeup and yesterday's messy bun before I could even respond. She launched into this awkward apology, saying she'd been one of the people who commented something mean on the original video but felt terrible after seeing Derek's public apology and realized how wrong cyberbullying is, her exact words. I just stood there clutching my terracotta sheets, decision made by panic. Apparently, while the stranger had her character development moment, the home goods section, when she finally stopped talking, I managed to say thanks. It's fine, good talk and speed walk too. Checkout sat in my car for 20 minutes. Afterward, with the AC blasting even, though it was only 62 degrees outside, that's when it hit me, I'm not just Eliana. Anymore to some people, I'm the girl from the TikTok. My humiliation has become my identifier, and that realization made me angry in a way I hadn't felt before. Not sad angry like I'd been for weeks, pure, energizing, get done angry. Sunday morning, I woke up at 6:13 a.m. Couldn't sleep and made a list in my notes app. Cut my hair, always wanted to try a LW, but Derek liked it long, joined that kickboxing class. Amara keeps talking about finally apply for that certificate. Program I've been putting off, redecorate. My bedroom no more masculine friendly, color scheme. Download a dating app by 1100 a.m. I'd already crossed off. Number 1, walked into Supercuts without an appointment. Living dangerously, LOL, and chopped off 7 in of hair. The stylist kept asking if I was sure, if I needed more time to think about it, if someone had talked to it. Told her nope, just needed a change. She didn't need to know I was mentally naming each snip of the scissors after something Derek had said to me over the years. You'd look better with more defined eyebrows. Snip. No guy wants a girl who eats more than him. Snip. Your laugh is kind of loud sometimes. Snip. When she spun me around to see the final result, I barely recognized myself. In a good way, my neck felt lighter. My head felt lighter. Hell, my whole being felt lighter. Posted a selfie on Instagram. When I got home, just me with my new hair, sunlight from my kitchen window, and the caption, "New month, new me," within an hour. It had 87 likes, including from Xavier and 2 of Derek's other friends. Petty satisfaction maybe, but I'll take the small wins. Monday brought item number 2 on my list. Dragged myself to Amar's kickboxing studio at an ungodly hour, convinced I'd make a fool of myself. The instructor, Margaret, coincidentally the same name as Amara's roommate, kept us moving so fast I didn't have time to feel self-conscious. By the end, I was drenched in sweat and my arms felt like overcooked spaghetti, but also strangely powerful. Checked my phone after class to find 3 missed calls from unknown numbers. Derek's new burner phone tactic, and 1 text from Xavier asking if we could talk sometime. Left on. Read not ready for that conversation yet. Tuesday. I finally tackled item number 3 and applied for that digital marketing certificate I've been considering for ages. Derek always said it was a waste of money since I already have a stable job. Took me 43 minutes to fill out the application, another 20 to write the short personal statement, and about 3 seconds to hit submit before I could overthink it. Had a mini attack immediately after wondering if I was making a huge mistake. Called my mom, who talked me down in her usual way. Half encouragement, half I don't understand why you're complicating your life, but I support you anyway. Wednesday was when things got intense. I was at the grocery store when my phone started blowing up with texts from Amara. Call me now, Derek is on Instagram Live. He's talking about you. It's bad. I abandoned my cart in the middle of the cereal aisle, underpaid grocery store workers, and ran to my car to watch the train wreck. Sure enough, there was Derek, clearly drunk at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, red-faced and slurring, talking directly to the camera about how he'd lost the love of his life and didn't know how to go on. The comments were rolling in fast, mostly people telling him to get help or turn off the live, but he just kept going. Reading some comments aloud and ignoring others. Then he said something that made my blood freeze. I know she's watching. This, Ilana, I'm coming over tonight. We need to talk this out. I'm not taking no for an answer anymore. I immediately called Amara in full panic mode. She offered to come stay with me, but I ended up calling my brother Miguel instead. He's closer to my apartment and frankly more intimidating if Derek actually showed up. Miguel arrived at 5:30 p.m. with girlfriend Tanya, and enough overnight stuff for the week told me not to argue they were staying until this dude gets the message, made himself at home on my couch, connected his Nintendo, switched to my TV, and proceeded to act like this was all totally normal. By 8 o'clock p.m., I'd almost convinced myself Derek's threat was just drunk talk. By 9:00 p.m., I was starting to relax. By 9:47 p.m., the doorbell rang. Miguel answered while Tanya and I stood back. I could hear Derek's voice slurred and emotional, demanding to see me. Miguel's responses were low and calm. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. After about 5 minutes, I heard my door close. Miguel came back looking annoyed but calm, said Derek had finally left after Miguel convinced him this wasn't a good time. Understatement of the year. Also mentioned that Derek looked rough and smelled he'd bathed in Jack Daniels. I slept terribly that night, jumping at every sound outside my window, kept thinking about how different things were just 5 weeks ago, when I still believed Derek was the one, when I still thought I knew him. Thursday morning, I woke up to a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Derek's mom. I'm worried about him and don't know what to do. He barely sleeps, lost his job yesterday for showing up drunk. I know you don't owe him anything, but please call me. Talk about emotional manipulation. She'd always done this, treated Derek like he couldn't possibly handle consequences, swooping in to fix everything. One of many red flags I'd ignored. I showed the text to Miguel, who advised ignoring it. But something about it bothered all day. Not guilt exactly, but a nagging feeling that this situation was spiraling beyond what I'd intended. Around 3 p.m., I decided to text her back. I'm sorry Derek is struggling, but I'm not responsible for his choices or his healing. Please encourage him to get professional help. She responded immediately, he made a mistake. Everyone deserves forgiveness. I didn't reply. Some mistakes change how you see a person forever. That evening, something unexpected happened. I was scrolling through TikTok, glutton for punishment. I know when I saw a video from someone I didn't follow. It was one of those storytime TikToks, and the caption made my heart stop. When your friend humiliates his girlfriend on TikTok and you finally call him out for being toxic. It was Franklin, one of Derek's longtime friends, the guy who was literally in the original video laughing along. In the video, Franklin explained how he'd been complicit in Derek D's toxic behavior for years, not just with me, but with previous girlfriends too. How the friend group had a pattern of encouraging Derek's worst impulses. How the TikTok incident had been a wake-up call for him personally. He ended with, Eliana, if you see this, I'm sorry we all failed you and Derek, man, get help. This isn't about winning her back. This is about becoming someone who would never hurt her in the first place. I watched it 7 times, sent it to Amara, who responded with wholly and nothing else for a full 10 minutes. Then Franklin DM'd me on Instagram. Hey, hope that didn't make things worse, just couldn't stay silent anymore. No pressure to respond. I sat with that for a while, appreciated that he didn't expect a response. Finally wrote back, thanks for speaking up, better late than never. We ended up having a surprisingly honest conversation. He told me Derek had been spiraling hard since I left, drinking daily, getting into fights, alienating friends. Said the friend group was divided between those enabling him and those trying to get him help. Franklin also confirmed something I'd suspected. This wasn't the first time Derek had spoken about me that way, just the first time it was recorded. That hit different, knowing it wasn't a one-time drunk mistake, but a pattern, a true reflection of how he saw me when I wasn't around. Friday yesterday marked exactly 1 month since I walked away. I decided to celebrate my Independence Day by tackling the final item on my list, downloading a dating app. Not because I'm ready to date, God no, but because I wanted to remind myself that Derek isn't the only option in the universe, that there's a whole world of people who might appreciate me without secretly tearing me down. Setting up my profile felt weirdly vulnerable, choosing photos where I actually liked how I looked, writing a bio that was authentically me, not curated to appeal to one specific person's preferences, like stretching muscles I'd forgotten I had. I had just finished setting up my profile when my phone rang, another unknown number. I almost declined it, automatically assuming it was Derek with yet another burner phone, but something made me answer. It wasn't Derek. It was his friend Xavier. Xavier sounded weird, nervous, talking too fast, said he needed to tell me something important, something about the original TikTok, something that might change how I saw everything. I almost hung up, almost told him I was done with all of it, done with Derek, done with his friends and their drama. But then Xavier said the TikTok wasn't spontaneous, Eliana Derek planned it, and I can prove it. I'm seeing Xavier today at 2 p.m. at the Starbucks. Miguel insisted on coming with me and sitting at a nearby table just in case. I have no idea what Xavier wants to tell me. I'll update after I meet with Xavier. My stomach's in knots and I've changed my outfit 4 times already. Wish me luck. Guess edit just about for Starbucks. Thanks for all the supportive comments. To answer the most common questions, no, I haven't unblocked Derek and don't plan to. Yes, I'm bringing my pepper spray. Thanks for the concern. LOL. And no, I don't want Derek back. I just want to understand WTF happened last. Update, y'all. I've rewritten this post 4 times now because I still can't believe everything that's happened. First, thank you to everyone who sent supportive messages after my cliffhanger. Last update, sorry from you hanging, but I genuinely needed time to process what Xavier showed me. Let's back up to Saturday at 2:03 p.m. I walked into Starbucks with my stomach in knots, spotted Xavier in this corner booth, nervously shredding a napkin. Miguel took his position at a table near the door, looking very obvious to his disguise of sunglasses worn indoors. Xavier looked rough, not Derek level disaster, but definitely stressed. Dark circles under his eyes, hair unwashed, wearing the same shirt I'd seen him in at least 3 times on Instagram. Recently, the first 5 minutes were painfully awkward. He apologized about 17 different ways for his part in the TikTok situation. I just sipped my LTE and waited for him to get to the point. Finally, he pulled out his phone. Before I show you this, you need to know I didn't find it until yesterday. I was going through some old group chats trying to find a pizza place we ordered from once, and I saw this thread that Derek started about a month before. He slid his phone across the table. It was opened to a WhatsApp group chat titled Weekend Warriors. I roll with Derek, Xavier Franklin, and 2 other guys. The messages were from 5 weeks before the TikTok incident. Derek, need your help with something, boys. Franklin, what's up? Derek, trying to figure out how to break up with a Xavier. Whoa, for real, thought you guys were looking at places together. Derek, yeah, that's the problem. She's getting too serious. Plus, I met someone at the gym. I felt my face getting hot as I scrolled. Derek went on to explain that he'd been talking to his words a girl named Adriana for almost 3 months, but he was worried about how I'd react to a breakup since we shared so many friends and she can get emotional. Excuse me. As I kept reading, it got worse. Derek was literally asking his friends for advice on how to make me break up with him so he could look like the good guy. Their suggestions ranged from gradually becoming more distant to picking fights over nothing to, and this is what made me nearly drop the phone, being on social media so she sees it and dumps you. The last message in the thread was from Derek. TikTok might be the move. She never checks it anyway. I looked up at Xavier, who couldn't meet my eyes. Why? Show me this now, I asked. He explained that after our last conversation, he'd been feeling increasingly guilty about his part and everything. Said he'd assumed the TikTok was just drunk stupidity, not a calculated move. Didn't know about Adriana until he found these messages Derek's been linked to everyone. Xavier said, telling us how heartbroken he is, how he the biggest mistake of his life. Meanwhile, he's still texting Adriana. I saw them together at Chipotle yesterday. Was like the final puzzle piece clicking into place. The TikTok wasn't a drunken mistake. It was deliberate, just a plan that backfired when I disappeared. Instead of confronting him, I sat there for a moment trying to process the fact that not only had Derek intentionally humiliated me online, but he'd done it to escape our relationship and with someone else, and now he was playing the devastated boyfriend role to save face with everyone. I thanked Xavier for showing me the truth, then walked out of Starbucks with Miguel trailing behind, asking 70 questions I wasn't ready to answer. That night, I made a decision. After 37 days of silence, I was going to talk to Derek on my terms, not to get back together. That ship had sailed, hit an iceberg, and sunk to the bottom of the but to let him know that I knew everything. Sunday morning at exactly 10 a.m., I texted Derek for my real number. We need to talk today, 2 p.m. Java Hut on. Main, don't be late, he responded within 12 seconds. I'll be there. Thank you, Alana. I love you. Spoiler alert, he does not in fact love me. I spent the next 3 hours oscillating between absolute certainty and complete panic. Changed my outfit 4 times, practiced what I wanted to say in the mirror like I was preparing for a job interview. Called Amara twice to talk me off the ledge. Arrived at Java Hut 20 minutes early to secure the corner table with my back to all. Tactical positioning. Ordered a chai latte. I had zero intention of actually drinking. Derek walked in at 1:58 p.m. Scanning the cafe until he spotted me. He looked better than I expected, showered, shaved, wearing the blue button-down I'd given him. For a split second. My heart did that familiar flip it always did. When I saw him, then I remembered the WhatsApp messages. He reached for a hug, which I avoided by gesturing to the chair across from me. His face fell, but he sat down, launched immediately into what sounded like a rehearsed speech about how sorry he was, how much he missed me, how the past month and the worst of his life. I let him talk for exactly 2 minutes. Then I placed my phone screen up between US Open to the screenshots Xavier had sent me of the group chat. "So, who's Adriana?" I asked. The look on his face, y'all, it was like watching someone get hit with a taser. His mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. Those are Xavier. Shouldn't have just tell me the truth. Derek, for once, the next 20 minutes were illuminating. Once he realized he was caught, the apologies stopped and the excuses started. Adriana was just a friend at first. Sure, Jan, he'd been confused about our relationship for months. He thought 3 years was too long to be with one person in your 20s. The TikTok was stupid, but he never thought I'd see it. I panicked when you disappeared. He admitted. I realized I'd made a huge mistake. Adriana wasn't worth losing you over. That's when it clicked. He wasn't devastated about hurting me. He was devastated about looking like the bad guy, about losing control of the narrative, about everyone knowing what he'd done. I took a sip of my cold chai and said the words I'd been practicing all morning. I'm not here to get act together, Derek. I'm here to tell you that I know everything and don't contact me, my friends, or my family again. We're over. His eyes welled up with tears that I'm now 99% sure were performative. But I love you, he said. We can fix this. I'll do anything. If you loved me, you wouldn't have spent 3 months planning how to humiliate me so you could be with someone else. I stood up, gathering my purse and jacket. That's when he played his final card, one I wasn't expecting. Broke the lease on my apartment, he blurted out. I've been staying my mom. I thought we'd be moving in together next month like we planned. For a brief, insane moment, I felt guilty, like I was the one ruining his life then. I remembered the cold calculation of those messages, planning exactly how to break my heart in the most public way possible. You should call Adriana, I said. I'm sure she has room at her place. And then I walked out. No dramatic exit, no scene, just done. He texted 17 times in the next 2 hours, switching from apologetic to angry to desperate and back again. I didn't reply to any of them, just took screenshots and sent them to Amara with the caption, "The audacity." Continues. Around noon, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. My first thought was, here we go again, but it wasn't Derek. It was Adriana. Eliana. You don't know me, but I think to talk. Derek's been telling me one story, and apparently telling you another. We met for coffee that afternoon. I've consumed enough caffeine this week to power a small city. Turns out Adriana had no idea Derek had a girlfriend until 2 weeks ago when she saw his public apology TikTok. He told her he was single, had been for months, and was dealing with a crazy ex who couldn't let go. Sound familiar? The craziest part? She's actually nice. We ended up talking for 3 hours, comparing notes on Derek's lies. She showed me texts where he was telling her he loved her the same day he was leaving sobbing voicemails on my phone. By the end of our conversation, we were following each other on Instagram and had made tentative plans to check out a new wine bar that's opening next month. Trust issues. Solidarity, I guess. That night, I finally did something I'd been putting off. I unblocked Derek on Instagram just temporarily and went to his profile. His story from 3 hours earlier was a black screen with the song glimpse of us playing Joe's Sad Boy anthem, so on brand, and the text, "Sometimes you don't know what you have until it's gone." His profile picture was still us from last summer. His most recent post, a throwback photo of us from our second anniversary with the caption, "I'd give anything to go back." Meanwhile, Adriana had sent me screenshots of him texting her that same day, asking if she wanted to hang out later. I've never felt more certain of a decision in my life. Yesterday marked exactly 40 days since I discovered the TikTok. 6 weeks of pain, anger, confusion, and finally clarity. Officially blocked Derek on every platform. Changed my number this morning. Told my landlord under no circumstances should he ever be allowed into the building. And then I did some just for me. Remember that digital marketing certificate I applied for? I got accepted. Yesterday, classes start next month. Paid the deposit with money I'd been saving for the apartment Derek and were supposed to share last night. Miguel and a few other friends came over for an impromptu goodbye Derek party. We ordered pizza, drank cheap wine, and took turns reading the increasingly desperate text he sent over this past week's toxic no, but also weirdly cathartic at one point. Miguel asked if I was sad about wasting 3 years with Derek, and the thing is, I'm not. Those years weren't a waste. They were a lesson about red flags I'll never ignore again, about my own resilience, about the kind of relationship I actually deserve. This morning, I woke up to a notification that Derek had tagged me in a new Instagram post. My finger hovered over the view button for about 3 seconds before I realized I don't care what it says. His words have no power over me anymore. Instead, I deleted the notification, made my coffee, and sat on my balcony watching the sunrise. So I guess this is officially the end of this saga, y'all. Edit. People are asking if I'm worried Derek will see this post. Honestly, part of me hopes he does. Let him read how thoroughly he failed at controlling this narrative. Let him see that his hideous ex is thriving without him. And to any other girls out there dealing with your own dakes, you deserve better and better. Exists, trust me. The courtroom was unnervingly silent as 5-year-old Emily Carter stepped through the heavy wooden doors, her tiny hand clutching the leash of Rex, a German shepherd with a long, jagged scar running along his side. Every eye in the room followed the small girl as she made her way toward the witness stand, her movements hesitant but determined. Judge Mark Sullivan, a seasoned man with years of legal experience, leaned forward slightly, observing the child with a measured gaze. He knew that the weight of the entire case rested on her fragile shoulders. Emily was the sole witness to an attempted abduction, a case that, if one, could put a dangerous man behind bars for life. But there was one problem. Emily hadn't spoken a single word since the attack across the courtroom. Richard Hale sat at the defense table, his expression composed, even smug. A 45-year-old software engineer with an unassuming appearance. Hale had been arrested after an eyewitness placed him at the scene of Emily's attempted abduction, but his defense was solid. No physical evidence, no confession, and a witness who couldn't testify. His lawyer had already crafted a strategy that hinged on discrediting the traumatized child's ability to identify him. But then something happened as Emily settled onto the witness chair. Her green eyes met Richard Hale's. Her small fingers trembled as they made a subtle movement, noticeable to the untrained eye. It was a silent signal, one she had learned over weeks of therapy. Only 2 beings in the room caught it, Rex and Judge Sullivan. Rex's reaction was immediate. The moment Emily's fingers twitched in that silent plea for help, the dog's body went rigid, his ears pricked forward, his muscles coiling like a loaded spring. A low, guttural growl rumbled from deep within his chest, a sound of warning, of recognition. His golden brown eyes locked onto Hale, unwavering and piercing. The reaction sent a ripple of unease through the courtroom. A murmur spread through the spectators, whispers of speculation filling the air. Something about the dog's behavior struck a chord. This wasn't just a well-trained support animal reacting to his handler's distress. This was something deeper, something primal. Judge Sullivan's hand came down hard on the gavel, the sharp crack echoing like thunder through the room. This court will take a 15-minute recess, he declared, his voice unusually urgent. The prosecutor, Jenna Collins, shot him a questioning look, but he didn't meet her eyes. Instead, he glanced at Emily, who clung to Rex like a lifeline. Something significant had just happened, and he needed to understand exactly what it was before the trial proceeded any further. As the courtroom emptied, Sullivan remained seated, his mind racing. He had seen many things in his years on the bench, but never had a therapy dog reacted with such undeniable certainty. What had Rex recognized, and more importantly, what did that mean for the case outside in the hallway? Emily knelt beside Rex, her tiny hands gripping his fur tightly. Her mother, Sarah Carter, bent down beside her, smoothing back the child's curly hair with trembling fingers. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" she whispered. Emily didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her grip on Rex tightened, her small frame pressing into his side. Jack Monroe, the lead investigator on the case, watched from a few steps away, a grizzled FBI agent with decades of experience. Monroe had a gut instinct that had served him well over the years, and right now his gut told him that whatever just happened in that courtroom was a game changer. He stepped closer to Judge Sullivan. Something spooked that dog. He murmured, his voice low. "I'd bet my badge he recognizes Hale from somewhere." Sullivan exhaled slowly, his sharp blue eyes narrowing. "Then we need to find out where." Meanwhile, inside the defense's private room, Richard Hale sat across from his attorney, Michael Graves. The moment they were alone, The smug confidence on Hale's face twisted into something else, something colder. His fingers drummed against the table as he replayed the moment in his mind. The girl hadn't spoken, but the dog. The dog had reacted. He muttered under his breath, Graves raised an eyebrow. What? Hale forced a small smile. Nothing, he said, but his mind was already racing. That damn dog. He hadn't considered the animal would be a problem. But now he realized Rex might be the key to unraveling everything. The 15-minute recess neared its end. Judge Sullivan straightened his robes and took a deep breath. He didn't believe in coincidences, and right now something told him that Rex had just given them the most important clue of the trial. It was time to dig deeper, and for the first time since the case had started, he felt the tide shifting before the silence, before the courtroom, before the terror that stole her voice. Emily Carter was a vibrant chatterbox. Of a child at 5 years old, she was the kind of girl who filled a room with endless stories, her bright blue eyes gleaming with curiosity and mischief. She loved fairy tales, stuffed animals, and the way her mother read bedtime stories, with different voices for each character. She had never known fear until that fateful afternoon. It had been a perfect spring day, the kind where the scent of blooming flowers drifted through the air and the warm sun painted golden streaks across the backyard. Sarah Carter had been watching her daughter from the kitchen window, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips as Emily twirled in the yard, her pink dress flaring like a dancer's. David Carter was due home in a few hours, and she had been debating whether to start dinner or wait for him. It should have been an ordinary afternoon. It should have been safe. At 3:42 p.m., Sarah's phone rang. It was her sister calling from out of state, and she stepped inside for what she thought would be a quick conversation. 4 minutes. That was all it took. When she returned to the yard, the gate stood ajar. A wave of cold terror shot through her veins. Her breath caught in her throat as she scanned the space where her daughter had been. Emily was still there, but she wasn't alone. A black van idled near the curb, its side door slightly open. A man knelt beside Emily, his smile unnervingly warm. "I have puppies in my van," he was saying, his voice smooth, practiced. "Special ones. They need a little girl to take care of them. Would you like to see?" Sarah's world seemed to slow, her instincts screaming before her mind could process what was happening. Her voice sliced through the air. "Emily." The man's head snapped up, his smile vanished, replaced by something sharp and calculating. In an instant, he grabbed Emily's arm. Emily froze. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She only stared at him with wide, unblinking eyes, as if some deep-rooted fear had locked her in place. Across the street, Martha Jenkins, a retired nurse walking her terrier, saw everything unfold. Her voice weathered with age but strong with conviction rang out. "Hey, get away from that child." The man hesitated. His grip loosened for a fraction of a second. That was all it took. Emily yanked her arm free and bolted toward her mother. Sarah scooped her daughter into her arms just as the van's engine roared, the tires screamed, reached against the pavement. The vehicle sped away, leaving black streaks of rubber on the road. Sarah clutched Emily tightly, her heart pounding against her ribs. But Emily didn't cry. She didn't say a word. She only buried her face into her mother's shoulder and trembled. The police arrived within minutes. Detective Jack Monroe, a seasoned investigator from the FBI's Child Abduction Task Force, took immediate control of the scene. His graying hair and sharp brown eyes spoke of years spent chasing shadows, searching for missing children who were often never found. He had seen this pattern before. Too many times. He fits the profile, Monroe muttered, flipping through a worn notebook. 4 children have disappeared in the last 18 months, all approached near their homes, all lured by promises of puppies. His partner, Agent Lisa Grant, knelt beside Emily, her voice gentle but firm. "Sweetheart, do you remember the..." Man looked like silence. Sarah brushed Emily's hair back, her hands trembling. "Honey, it's okay, you're safe. Now can you tell the nice officer what..." He looked like Emily's small hands gripped her mother's sweater tightly, but she didn't speak. She didn't nod. She didn't shake her head. It was as if someone had flipped a switch, her voice off completely. "She hasn't said a word since I picked her up," Sarah whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "She just won't talk." Agent Grant exchanged a look with Monroe. "Selective mutism," she murmured. Trauma response. Monroe sighed, rubbing his temple. "Without a statement, we don't have much. The description is vague. A man, black van, it could be anyone." Martha Jenkins, who had witnessed the abduction attempt, stepped forward. "Got part of the license plate," she said firmly, The first three letters, Y. KZ Monroe's gaze snapped to her. That's something. Sarah, still clutching Emily, felt a surge of helplessness. Her daughter, once so full of life, had retreated into herself, and in the days that followed it only got worse. Emily stopped playing, she stopped drawing, she refused to leave the house, flinching at the sight of passing cars. She barely slept, and when she did, her nights were filled with silent nightmares, her small body thrashing against invisible threats. Her screams never came, only gasps of terror that woke her parents in the dead of night. Sarah and David tried everything. Story time, favorite foods, her beloved stuffed bunny. Nothing worked. The child they knew was slipping further and further away. One evening, Sarah sat across from David at the kitchen table, her eyes hollow from exhaustion. The therapist recommended a support animal, she said quietly. Therapy dog. David ran tired hand through his hair. You really think that'll help? I don't know, Sarah admitted, but I'm willing to try anything. Neither of them could have known how much that decision would change everything, because while Emily had lost her voice, there was someone who could still hear her. And his name was Rex. The air inside Dr. Laura Bennett's animal rehabilitation center was thick with the scent of antiseptic and the earthy musk for the room was quiet except for the rhythmic ticking of the clock and the occasional scratch of claws against the tiled floor. On a large orthopedic bed near the window, a German shepherd lay, still, his deep brown eyes tracking every movement with quiet intensity. His name was Rex. Once he had been one of the finest canine officers in the city's police force, a dog whose instincts and training had saved lives. But now he bore the scars of sacrifice, one particularly jagged mark running down his right flank, a permanent reminder of the night that ended his career 3 years ago during a raid to rescue a kidnapped child. Rex had lunged at an armed suspect without hesitation. The man had slashed at him with a knife meant for an ulcer. Cutting deep into his flesh, Rex had subdued the suspect. Even blood darkened his fur. But in the months that followed, the injury never fully healed. His mobility was affected, and the department strapped for funds made the difficult decision to retire him. He had been placed on a euthanasia list, deemed unfit for service. That was before Laura stepped in. Dr. Bennett had been running the therapy animal program for years, specializing in cases where animals could help trauma survivors. When she heard about Rex's case, she fought to adopt him, convinced that his sharp mind and unwavering loyalty still had value, and now she was about to test that belief. Sarah Carter sat nervously in a chair, her fingers gripping the fabric of her skirt. Emily stood behind her, peeking out from behind her mother's shoulder. The little girl had refused to speak since the incident 2 weeks ago, and though she had attended therapy, nothing had coaxed a word from her. Laura knelt to Emily's level, her voice gentle. Hi, Emily. My name is Laura. I work with very special dogs that help kids who have been through scary things. Emily said nothing, her green eyes flickering to the large German shepherd. A few feet away, Rex sat patiently, his ears perked forward, but he didn't move. Toward her, he simply watched, his presence steady and unthreatening. Would you like to meet him? Laura asked. The little girl didn't answer, but she didn't run either. That was a start. Sarah smoothed her daughter's hair. He's a very nice dog. Sweetheart, he used to be a police dog, just like the ones in your storybooks. Laura gestured to Rex and gave a quiet command. Stay. The German shepherd didn't much as twitch. Laura turned back to Emily. You don't have to come close if you don't want to. Rex will wait right here, but if you feel ready, you can put out your hand, and he'll come to you. Emily hesitated. For long moments she remained frozen in place. Then, inch by inch, she stepped out from behind her mother, her tiny hand lifted, hesitant but deliberate. Rex remained, still waiting for the final cue. When Laura nodded, he slowly lowered his head and took a careful step forward. Then another and another. The moment his warm breath touched Emily's palm, something shifted. Emily's fingers curled slightly, brushing through the dog's neck, for the connection was made. Sarah gasped, softly pressing a hand to her mouth. It was the first time Emily had reached out to anything or anyone since the attack. Tears welled in her eyes. She whispered, "Oh, baby." Emily's small fingers burrowed deeper into Rex's fur, gripping him as if he were the only solid thing in a world that had turned terrifyingly uncertain. Laura smiled. That's a good girl, Emily. Rex likes you. The child said nothing, but she didn't let go. Over the next few weeks, Rex and Emily became inseparable. At home, she would sit beside him for hours, her tiny hands tracing the scar along his side. When nightmares woke her in the middle of the night, it was Rex's steady heartbeat that calmed her, though she still refused to speak. She began drawing again, simple crayon, pictures of a girl and a dog standing together against shadowy figures one afternoon. While sitting on the floor of Liz's office, Emily was watching Rex perform a basas or bachata simple trick when something remarkable happened. Good boy, she whispered. The words were so soft that for a moment Sarah thought she had imagined them. But when she turned, she saw Emily staring at Rex, her lips slightly parted in wonder, as if she too had surprised herself. Tears filled Sarah's eyes. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Laura placed a gentle hand on Sarah's arm. She trusts him, she murmured. Sometimes trust is the first step toward finding your voice again. Sarah squeezed her hand. Then we'll follow wherever that trust leads, and it would lead them somewhere. They never expected to a courtroom where a monster would finally be unmasked. The air inside the courtroom was thick with tension. The seats in the gallery were filled with journalists, families, and legal observers, all watching with anticipation. As one of the most high-profile trials in recent memory was about to begin, in the center of the room, the defendant Richard Hale sat beside his attorney. His expression unreadable despite the charges against him. He appeared disturbingly calm, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the polished wood of the defense table. Seated beside her mother, Emily Carter clutched the leash of Rex tightly, her small fingers wrapped around the thick fabric as if it were a lifeline. The German shepherd sat alert beside her, his ears pricked forward, his deep brown eyes locked onto Hale. Every so often his nose would twitch as if he were scenting something familiar in the air. All rise. The BFF's voice rang through the chamber as Judge Mark Sullivan entered, his robe flowing behind him. He took his seat at the elevated bench, his sharp eyes scanning the room before settling briefly on Emily and Rex. He had already made a ruling allowing the therapy dog to be present, but he knew that decision was far from universally accepted. Before we proceed with opening statements, Sullivan said, his deep voice measured and controlled, the court will hear arguments regarding the presence of the support animal in these proceedings. Michael Graves, the defense attorney, rose smoothly from his seat and adjusted his tie. Your Honor, he began, his tone polite but firm. While we understand the prosecution's argument for emotional support, the presence of this animal is highly prejudicial. A large German shepherd in the courtroom may evoke an emotional response from the jury that would unfairly bias them against my client. We request that the dog be removed during testimony. Jenna Collins, the lead prosecutor, stood immediately in response. Your Honor, Emily Carter's 5 years old and a trauma survivor. She has been diagnosed with selective mutism as a result of her experience. Rex is not here as a spectacle. He is here as a medically necessary support animal. His presence allows Emily to participate in these proceedings without undue distress. Judge Sullivan sat back, his expression unreadable. I have already reviewed the documentation submitted by the child psychologist and the animal behaviorist. The dog remains. A murmur spread the courtroom, some in agreement, grumbling under their breath. Graves pressed his lips together, displeased, but unwilling to argue further. He returned to his seat, shooting a quick glance at Hale, who remained eerily expressionless. The trial began in earnest. The prosecution painted a chilling picture of Hale's actions, a pattern of manipulation, deception, and predatory behavior spanning years. Witnesses were called, including the elderly neighbor, Martha Jenkins, who recounted the terrifying moment she saw Hale trying to lure Emily into his van. Her voice trembled as she described the way he had grabbed the child's arm before fleeing. When confronted, Emily sat silently through it, all her small frame dwarfed by the large wooden chair. Her fingers occasionally flexed around the leash, but she never let go. Whenever the tension became too much, she would look down at Rex, who remained perfectly still, his quiet presence grounding her. Then it was time for her testimony. A hush fell over the courtroom as Emily was gently led to the witness stand. Sarah Carter walked with her, her protective gaze never leaving her daughter. She helped Emily into the seat before stepping away, though her every muscle was taut with the desire to scoop her daughter into her arms and take her far from this place. Jenna Collins approached carefully, her demeanor soft and warm. Hi, Emily, she said with a gentle smile. I know this is a little scary, but remember, you don't have to say anything. You don't want to. You can just nod or shake your head if you feel more comfortable, and if you ever need a break, you can let us know. Emily didn't look at her. Her gaze was fixed on the table, her breathing shallow but then as if sent her. Unease, Rex pressed his body lightly. Against her leg she reached down and gripped a handful of his fur. Slowly she nodded. Good, Jenna said, keeping her voice light. Emily, can you tell us who was with you in your yard that day? Lee hesitated. She didn't lift her head, but after a long moment, she slowly raised her arm and pointed directly at Richard. Hale, the defendant's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, a brief involuntary tightening of his jaw. Graves immediately stood. Objection. The child has been repeatedly shown images of my client prior to trial. This identification is unreliable, Judge. Sullivan held up a hand, overruled. The jury will determine the credibility of the witness, Jenna continued. Emily, did this man say anything to you that day? The child didn't speak. Instead, she made a small movement with her hand, a subtle sign. It was the same signal she had given before, the one that Rex understood, the German Shepherd responded. Instantly, his ears snapped forward, his muscles tensed, and a deep guttural growl rumbled from his chest. Aggressive. It was a warning. The reaction sent a shockwave through the courtroom. Even Judge S.U. sat forward, his brow furrowed. Graves stood again, this time more urgently. Your Honor, I object. This is theatric, but Sullivan wasn't listening. He was watching Rex. The dog had gone utterly still, his entire focus locked onto Hale, as if recognizing a scent only he could perceive. It was the same reaction he had when Emily first saw Hale, the same instant instinct to all response. A thought struck Sullivan. Then he turned to Jenna. Miss Collins, he said, his voice carefully measured, has this animal had any prior interaction with the defendant? Jenna hesitated. Not to my knowledge, Your Honor. Sullivan turned to the defense table. Mr. Hale, have you encountered this dog before? For the first time, Hale showed real emotion. His fingers, which had been tapping so calmly earlier, now clenched into a fist. He remained silent. Then Jenna's eyes widened as a sudden realization hit her. She turned to her co-counsel and whispered something. Quickly, a second later, a member of the prosecution team rushed out of the courtroom. What is going on? Saves? Demanded his patience thinning Jenna. Straightened, her expression unreadable. Your Honor, I request a short recess. There may be new evidence relevant to this case. Judge Sullivan studied her for a long moment before nodding. 15-minute recess. As the courtroom emptied, whispers filled the air. Speculation spread like wildfire. Had Rex just recognized Richard Hale, and if so, from where? Something told Judge Sullivan that the answer to that question would change everything. The weight of the case bore down on the prosecution team as new developments surfaced. Richard Hale had been officially linked to multiple disappearances, yet without Emily's full testimony. The trial teetered on the edge of uncertainty. What no one expected, however, was that the key to unraveling the case would not come from the child, but from the German Shepherd who never left her side. The morning was crisp as the prosecution team, led by Jenna presented their next motion to introduce new forensic evidence. The soil samples found in Richard Hale's van had been analyzed, and the results pointed to a very specific location, a remote, unoccupied cabin in the northern woods. Detective Jack Monroe, having worked on similar cases for decades, knew what this could mean. Your Honor, Collins addressed Judge Sullivan, we request a 24-hour recess to follow up on a crucial lead. We believe this evidence may provide the final piece needed to close this case. Michael Graves, Hale's defense attorney, immediately objected. Your Honor, this is nothing more than a delay tactic. My client has already been through extensive questioning, and there is no solid evidence tying him to this so-called cabin. Soil samples are circumstantial at best. Judge Sullivan's stern gaze silenced Graves' motion. Granted, he ruled. The prosecution has 24 hours. Court adjourned. As soon as the judge's gavel struck, Monroe and his team mobilized. Rex, Emily's ever-watchful protector, was brought along the operation. His reaction to Hale had been unmistakable. Perhaps he could sense something that human eyes had missed. The search team arrived at the desolate cabin by early afternoon. The place was eerily silent, the surrounding trees whispering with the wind. A thick layer of dust covered the porch, yet faint footprints leading toward the back door suggested recent activity. Rex was the first to react as soon as they entered the cabin. The dog's ears perked, his nose twitching with keen intensity. His body stiffened, tail to erect, muscles poised like a coiled spring. He let out a low growl, pacing anxiously at the threshold. This place is wrong, Monroe, murmured Rex. Knows something's here. The team proceeded cautiously, weapons drawn. Inside the cabin was sparse, a table, cot empty food can stacked in a corner. But then Monroe noticed something peculiar. The wooden floor near the back wall had an unnatural seam, a faint indentation that seemed out of place. He knocked on it. Hollow, there's something on here, he said with swift precision. The officers pried the boards loose. What lay beneath sent a shiver down their spines. A narrow staircase spiraled down into a hidden basement. The air grew cold and damp as they descended the dim light, revealing a horrific sight. Children's belongings, old toys, small shoes, a faded pink backpack, and in the farthest corner, chained but still alive, was a girl, Emma Sullivan. The 8-year-old had been missing. For 6 months, her face was pale, her clothes ragged, but the moment she saw the officers, her eyes filled with tears of recognition and relief. Help, she whispered, voice hoarse. From disuse, Rex reacted immediately, straining against his leash, whining as if sensing the suffering this child had endured. Monroe rushed forward, unlocking the chain, scooping Emma into his arms. You're safe now, he assured her. We've got you. Emma clung to him, her frail body trembling. The search had finally come to an end, but the nightmare wasn't over. Yet back at the courthouse, the news of Emma's rescue spread like wildfire. The gallery was packed as Collins prepared for the final strike. Against Hale, the judge allowed Emma's discovery to be introduced as evidence, along with the soil sample linking the cabin to his vehicle. Mr. Hale, Collins addressed the defendant, her voice sharp as steel. How do you explain the presence of an abducted child locked in a basement on a property tied directly to you for the first time? Richard Hale looked shaken. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered. Jenna Collins pressed forward, her tone unwavering. Your DNA was found on the chains. Your vehicle's tires match the tracks outside the cabin. And more importantly, Emma Sullivan is alive, meaning she can testify against you. The weight of those words settled over the courtroom. A single survivor meant a witness who could single-handedly dismantle his defense. Hale's carefully constructed composure began to crumble. His lawyer whispered furiously in his ear, but it was clear he was cornered, and then it happened again. Rex, lying at Emily's feet, suddenly lifted his head, his eyes narrowing at Hale. His hackles rose, a deep growl vibrating through his chest. The room went silent as the German shepherd took slow, deliberate steps forward. His gaze locked onto the defendant. It was a look of recognition. Hale flinched. Everyone saw it. The man who had maintained his arrogance throughout the trial was now visibly sweating, his hands gripping the edge of the table. He turned to his attorney, muttering something frantically. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, I want to change my plea. Gasps erupted across the room. Judge Sullivan's gaze darkened. Mr. Hale, are you stating that you wish to plead guilty? The room held its collective breath. Hale exhaled shakily. Yes, the trial's abrupt end sent shock waves through the nation. Richard Hale was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, his conviction sealing the fate of a man who had terrorized families for years. But the true heroes of the case weren't just the lawyers or the detectives. It was a 5-year-old girl who had found her courage and a dog who had never given up on her in the days following the sentencing. Emily spoke her first words in weeks, holding Rex's face in her small hands. She whispered, Thank you. Her parents wept, knowing that their daughter was finally finding her way back to them. And as Rex wagged his tail, nuzzling her gently, it was clear some bonds were unbreakable. No matter how dark the world became, there would always be those willing to stand against the darkness, even if they walked on 4 legs.